Check, check.
Yeah, William, you got.
douglAR politics. This is douglAR politics, yo. douglAR politics. Listen, douglAR politics, yeah. douglAR politics. This is douglAR politics, yeah. douglAR politics. This is douglAR politics. douglAR politics. This is douglAR politics, yo. douglAR politics.
Welcome and good night, everybody. Do not adjust your TV set. Do not adjust. Kiel Tacklalsingh, attorney at law. I am here to substitute for the great Anil Roberts. Usually takes on this program. I know it's very, very big shoes to fill. But tonight I will try to do my best to sort of imitate, and you know this imitation is the best form of flattery, to imitate the brilliant job that Anil Roberts does on a Saturday night. And in fact, every edition of the douglAR Politics, we're going to go through some of the major issues with you. I have Dr. Tim Gopeesingh with me. He's going to be co-hosting with me as well. He is going to be co-hosting the program and assisting Doc. I think it might take both of us to be able to fill Anil's shoes on a Saturday.
And that's been phenomenal.
Phenomenal.
And the amount of times that he does this, at least twice per week.
Twice per week, yeah.
Great
yeah.
admiration for, and his institutional knowledge is beyond belief. I always compliment him on the knowledge that he has stored over a period of time on the issues relating to politics.
Yeah, and the fact that he's able to pull facts, data off the top of his head, as a lawyer, I'm impressed, because I can imagine him doing some cross-examination in court.
So you have a big shoes to fill.
Yeah, that's some very, very big shoes to fill. So before we get into anything, let's start with a little roundup as to why we have programs like this, why we are calling out this dictatorial government every day. Doc, we are headed for perhaps the worst murder rate this country has ever seen in its history. We have just come off from perhaps the worst budget ever delivered in this country's history. Infrastructure in this country, roads, bridges, is perhaps at the worst state ever in this country. We have now come from perhaps the worst scandal in the country's history. That is the Nelson Gate scandal.
Yeah.
Never has there been a scandal of such epic proportions. We are at a stage in our democracy where perhaps at no point in time have independent institutions in our country have been undermined and under attack, constant attack by this PNM government. We are really in the worst state that this country has ever been under this current PNM regime.
Well, for my 28 years in politics, Kyle, and I've seen various governments. I've been following the politics since the 1980s, just coming back to Trinidad from specializing and so on, and have an interest in the development of the country. And as I would agree with you wholeheartedly that this is the worst government ever in the history of Trinidad and Tobago. We said that Chambers' government was incompetent, but this has been the most incompetent government that we have ever witnessed and have with us. And as you said, very dictatorial, autocratic. They lack management capacity and capability. They cannot run this country, and they should really give up and really call the elections. The honorable leader of the opposition has been calling for it. We have been calling up for it. After 2 years, 7 years, they have decimated this country in almost every institution and department that this country has to be managed.
As I started by saying, crime, worse as ever been.
Yes.
Infrastructure, worse as ever been. Democracy at its lowest in our country's history. And I didn't want to say witness, Doc. I want to say recorded history.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm much younger than you, but I want to say recorded history, right? The institutions in this country are so much under attack. They are cracking under pressure daily.
And these institutions were ensured by our former leaders of the opposition, who tried to ensure at Marlborough House that the political directors, whoever in government, and they foresaw that PNM and Eric Williams would be there for a long time. They tried to protect and shield the population from the political onslaught on the population. So they made sure that we had the Teaching Service Commission. We have about 18,000 teachers. Public Service Commission, the Judicial and Legal Service Commission, the Statutory Authority Service Commission. So these 4 institutions, and of course the Police Service Commission. So they are under onslaught as we see from day to day. And why is it the country is not crying out more? Because we have been bringing to the forefront the issues related to each of them. The Police Service Commission, the fall of the Police Service Commission, the interference at the highest level in the country by the Prime Minister and the President.
Yes.
Yeah. And I may want to bring in something here, because I have been following. My brother was an appeal court judge for this country in some time ago. He passed away unfortunately in 1997, but he acted as Chief Justice on 2 occasions, Justice Lloyd Gopeesingh. And I had been following, and my wife had been attorney, God bless her soul, she passed a number of months ago. And I had been following the Judicial and Legal Service Commission work. And I find, for me, I personally want to say that I find it to be appalling at the moment, because the judicial functions in this country leave a lot to be desired. I remember the days when in the appeal court there were no matters to be heard, because Justice Michael de Labastide had ensured at that time that all the court matters at that time were finished, and people were not languishing in the cells as a result of imperfections in the judicial service. But now even that service is falling. So the Teaching Service Commission, it's time enough that we put all these service commissions, the personnel. I mentioned to former Attorney General Al-Rawi, we have about 17,000 teachers. We have a number of people in the health sector. So when you have the Teaching Service Commission have to make transfers and appointments and so on, they have to go back to paperwork rather than having it on film, and so that they can deal with it. Until we don't do those things that we require to do, this country will not move forward. And this government, well, you don't expect anything from them, because they talk about digitization, and there has been no form of implementation of any of the policies.
Not at all. And what you spoke about there, that is really a constitutional law lesson that you've given. The entire point of service commissions in this country, including Police Service Commission,
that's right,
which the PNM had no problem in undermining and destroying when it came to the appointment of a commissioner of police, was a clear attack on the Constitution and independent issues, right? And one of the points, and we're going to get into some issues on crime that is happening. One of the reasons, in my view, Doc, and I know how you feel about it, one of the reasons we have a seriously horrific crime problem in this country is because the PNM is busy playing politics with the Commissioner of Police and the appointment and promotion of police officers, as opposed to allowing the police to act freely, independently, do their job and fight crime. And that has to be a serious problem, and that is one of the reasons. That is why we must bolt the crime problem squarely on the chest of the PNM. This is their interference with independent institutions that is causing the chaos we are now seeing in society.
They have interfered at the highest level within the police service. Kyle, as you mentioned, that I brought with me a little document that I think the population should be familiar with once more. And it relates to the issue of crime nationally. And that is a document that has been published and produced by former Professor Selwyn Ryan, God bless his soul, he passed. And that it was an existing, comprehensive and very relevant 437-page report. If a committee which the Honorable Kamala Prasad Bisesa had appointed very early into her tenure as Prime Minister 2010 and 2015. I brought this down from the website. It was commissioned to examine and determine the root causes of ongoing crime and find effective long-term solutions to restore peace, development, and progress to these areas. The report was done by Professor Ryan, one of the most esteemed distinguished scholars, and his team of equally acclaimed academics. Then Prime Minister Mrs. Prasad Bisesa had instructed her cabinet ministers. I remember when Prime Minister Mrs. Bisesa came to cabinet and said, ministers, this is a 437-page document from Professor Ryan and his team to urgently produce policies in keeping with these recommendations. And this was reflected in our pioneering, progressive, and unparalleled work in the social services, education, and sports sectors. So we took that into consideration, and we began implementing a number of the recommendations under that plan. But the vindictive anti-people robbery government, they cruelly abandoned these initiatives in 2015. Through Professor Ryan, although Professor Ryan has a long-standing, a very public friend and supporter of PM Rowley at that time, they abandoned his work. But we took the challenge between when it was published,
to
I think, to tackle crime head-on, including the social services, education, sports sectors, because the recommendations on that are as follows. Just at 1 minute.
No, let's hear.
The report is titled,
saying, what is the UNC plan? Well, we had a plan.
We had, the plan was there for PNM to take on. No time to quit, the report was said. Engaging youth at risk, which is the important thing now. Executive report of the Committee on Young Males and Crime in Trinidad and Tobago. And the report was in Parliament it was laid in Parliament on March 22nd, 2013 by our Prime Minister at that time, Mrs. Kamala Prasad Bisesa. And the detailed findings and recommendations cover topics such as race, ethnicity, gender, and the crime question. The dynamics of gang behavior and the drug trade. This is what we are experiencing now. Gang behavior and the drug trade. Prison reform, the justice system, and policing, because he tackled the justice system has fallen short, and the policing also. Prison reform is a thing for over 20, 30 years. The influence of popular music on crime, education, and training institutions. Kyle, you're young, but there was a time a number of years ago when these maxi taxi drivers carried the children to school with a loud, abrasive type of music.
I remember that.
And so that we had to move to make sure that music was removed from the maxi taxi
all
buses.
Positive steps,
because when these students reached the school, their brain was straddled with all sort of Lloyd noise. School as a safe place. Early childhood care and education, social inclusion, and strengthening the care environment. And we were the first country in the world under Mrs. Kamala Prasad Bisesa to achieve universal early childhood care and education. We followed some of the recommendations in the Selvin Ryan report. School as a safe place. Hopefully we'll be able to find some time to speak about the indiscipline and violence in school. Reforming our education system. We became leaders in education around the world with other countries like Singapore, Hong Kong, South Korea, Japan, Finland. We were in line with them, moving to the top of the world with our education system. Technical and vocational education and training. This is the Selvin Ryan report. But PNM scrapped a number of these tech box centers, which former Minister of Tertiary Education, Fazal Karim, had implemented.
And that has resulted in. Do we have the clips of the school violence? Actually, I want to play some of these clips. Dr. Gopeesingh there has set out what was the plan of the United National Congress.
And a number of these we implemented.
And a number of them, well, yes. What was the plan to tackle these issues in the school and also
in the society?
In society, and implementing these things in schools to ensure school discipline, to ensure that when children went to school, it was a place of learning, of education, and proper socializing. And instead, Archie, I don't know if you have some of those clips now. Instead, the kind of things that we are seeing in schools now is like this. Look at this. This is a former president's daughter.
Former President Ray Robinson. That's his daughter.
Look at what is taking
I had the pleasure and privilege of knowing for a number of years.
Look at what
students helping to keep the core principle on the ground.
Into the classrooms of Trinidad and Tobago.
Yes.
From school
Indeed,
children to
it is a
have a
future
principal
that
on the
engages
ground
the
and no
minds
help
of
is
young
being given
people
to us. First place, he
in
should not be
ways
there
that
in the
have
first
begun
place. So
to
the
change
respect
the
in
dynamics
schools
of
is not there at
education.
all.
Well,
And why is
in
that
this
so? There are a number of
Island
reasons,
Caribbean nation.
and we will talk about it.
Correct.
The other things on the
The
report that he
digital
had here,
era has
technical and
arrived.
vocational education and
And
training,
it's one
teacher
that excites
professionalism,
today
parent
the
and
leaders
community
of
involvement in
tomorrow,
schooling,
preparing them
and the key role
with a
of sports.
different
And
learning
we've now got it from the douglAR
existed
politics team.
when
While
simple teaching
chaos is
tools
taking place in our
like
schools,
chalk
while
and
crime
was
is
the norm.
unbridled in this country, every citizen is now
Starting
locked in
with
their
a laptop
house
for all
and locked
first
under
formers,
fear by criminals
the
and
government
politicians,
of Kamala
criminals
Prasad is
and
committed
gangsters.
to taking the gadgetry
Your Prime
to
Minister,
higher
who
levels,
attended
feeding the
Parliament
thirst
virtually
for
on Friday,
knowledge with a
didn't have the
diet
time to come
that
and face the music in
scientifically
Parliament
positions
because
the
he had
student
quote-unquote
population
COVID, and
for a
I'm sure Dr.
rapidly
Gopeesingh could tell us
changing
about
technological
symptoms of
world.
COVID. But I know, Doc, an inclination to play golf is not a
The
symptom
wisdom
of
of
COVID.
laptoping
I'm very
vividly
surprised. I
displayed
mean,
its proud
to get COVID 4 times.
at
I
the
had COVID. I
recently
probably
held
was the first
virtual
politician
Educare
to have got
Symposium
COVID. But
in
August,
Port of
just
Spain.
around the time of election in
Young
2020.
and
But
older
I'm surprised my
ones.
good friend, the Honorable Prime
students
Minister,
immersed
got
themselves
COVID.
in what
I
looked
saw
like a
one
silicon
commentator
setting
said it 6
where
times,
familiar
but news they
and
said it's 4
futuristic
times.
electronics
But I don't know.
dazzled their little eyes.
I don't want to make
and
any
captured
pronouncements in
their
it, but if he says this,
inquisitive
he had
imagination.
COVID. But
I
then
think this-
where the other
what you're doing
contacts,
here
they were
is
doing some
wonderful,
contact
and,
tracing
you know, it
originally
engages,
when the
us
COVID
teens
came around.
I don't know
You haven't heard about any
The
other contacts.
technology.
the legend, Mr.
And
Viv Richards now has to do
I
contact
recommend
tracing.
that
I don't know.
they do
That's
more
Viv
of
there?
this because
Yes, that
With him?
he's playing golf
it's
with the legend
extraordinary.
Viv Richards.
The
I know,
art of
I know,
non-linear
Dr.
video
You
production
may have had the
attracted
opportunity to
these
bowl
young
on Dr.
ladies
I played
from
against
St.
him
Augustine
for Trinidad.
High
He was the
School.
captain of the
As a
Combined
student
Islands team.
from
Then
their
it was
brother
Windward Islands and
institution,
Leeward Islands in
Bilview
But
1978.
the
1978.
point has to
practical
be.
But
demonstration.
Viv looks fit.
Yeah, Viv looks it. But the point has to be when this country is
What I was
basically
showing them
falling
was how
apart.
to use Autodesk
Basically
Maya.
falling apart.
It's a
Schools are in
program,
disarray.
that
Total
was
chaos.
online
Crime
by
out of
AutoCAD,
control.
and
Here you have the Prime Minister avoiding Parliament on Friday,
And finding the time to go and play golf.
finding the time to play golf.
Where
today.
people are marooned in their homes and they're
Yes.
fighting with their lives to be saved to get a meal because thousands are marooned in their home because of the flooding. And they make the excuse all the time about the people build their homes in lagoons and so on. But as some of our colleagues have been mentioning and the social commentators, what is happening with the places in the West? Are they in lagoons? Then they
No,
are being
they're
flooded?
also being flooded
Because
out
it's
very
total
seriously.
incompetence and mismanagement at the highest level. The Minister of Rural Development and the Minister of Local Government must hold themselves in shame,
Yes.
their heads in shame, because they have been unable to deal with the amount of water courses and clearing the waterways in the dry season.
Yes.
Now, Kyle, I'll take you back a little bit. You remember when Caroni Limited was there? A number of the agricultural areas were properly drained because Caroni Limited
Yes.
paid special interest on the drainage. They're no longer here.
Correct.
So the drainage system from Caroni areas gone. Petrotrin used to do a lot of drainage around the areas as well. They also gone.
Right.
So they're now left to the mercy of nature, and where people are now experiencing the agricultural people are experiencing a lot of problems, and people are flooding in their homes. Thousands and thousands on a yearly basis. This is highly unacceptable for a country which has all that money, and where PNM has spent over $320 billion so far. $320 billion they have spent in 7 years already here. And so what have they done with it? What has the Minister of Infrastructure, which ministry?
Local government and infrastructure, works.
Yeah, works. That's Rohan Sinanan.
Yes.
And then Faris now taking over, but his predecessor. But beside that, what is Prime Minister Rowley doing about helping the agricultural workers to be compensated and helping to prevent their crops from being destroyed? What is he going to do about the people who have lost a lot of furniture, a lot of cooking appliances, their refrigerators, their stoves? There should be a system where these people are compensated. Somebody should go on a fact-finding
there is
mission.
no system, or is it that the fact is that because of incompetence, because of poor management, because of poor planning, because they've shut down these institutions, as you say, Caroni, Petrotrin, etc., they simply didn't have the foresight, the vision, the planning, the management skills to foresee these problems and put systems in place to deal with it.
They foresee the problem, but they don't have the skills and the competence and the management capability.
And
I'm glad you're seeing it. This whole government has been a government of total incompetence and mismanagement. If you look at the members of parliament on the government side and see who are ministers X and minister Y, you could point out on about 3 or 4 of them that who can be held with some degree of ability to manage and to govern. But the rest, I would say, with due respect, you put them in a barrel and you lump all of them together with total mismanagement.
I want to let us, in my view, point to the minister that perhaps epitomizes and symbolizes incompetence in this country. Do we have the clip of Minister Hines, the Minister of National Security? What is his comments now? As you would know, Doc, as a minister, as a government, and as an elected official, honesty is very important.
Well, I remember, as you touched on that, I remember, well, we all trained in those days under Mr. Basdev Pandey. We learned at his feet in politics. I learned. And he told me 3 things. He said, Tim, you know, in politics, there are 3 things you must always remember. 1, don't ever tell a lie.
Yes.
Because a lie catches up with you. 2, do what your heart tells you. And if your heart tells you, and do what your conscience tells you. Yes. Those are 3 important things.
Well,
and one basic other thing, if you have to do something, think about it 5 steps down the line. If you do this, A to B, and B doesn't work for C and so on, you abandon the ship on that.
Well, on all those points, Doc, on all those points, in my view, this Minister of National Security has completely failed. When we come to the issue of crime and legal firearms, illegal firearms, we don't want. Legal firearms, the right people should be allowed to own them. Of course. That is a system all over the world.
Kyle, I want you to repeat what the Honorable Leader of the Opposition has indicated.
That clip. Do we have that clip? Do we have the clip of the Honorable Leader? Let us run that.
When she forms, go ahead.
Yes. Let's run that clip because it is important.
Which favors law-abiding citizens as opposed to criminals that the PNM now seems to favor. Any law the PNM brings to make it harder for law-abiding citizens to obtain firearms, a new UNC government will repeal any such law. Further, we will bring legislation to make it easier for law-abiding citizens to legally obtain firearms. And for those of you who don't like to hear that, you are welcome, just don't apply for one. Just don't apply if you're not happy with that. But those who believe that you can save yourselves and your family, you can imagine you're in gunshots outside your house and what you have? Nothing. You're like a sitting duck down there, but you're not even sitting duck, you're under the bed. You're hiding in fear. Can you imagine, I mean, women, we are strong, but can you imagine as a father, as a man in a house? You're totally emasculated. What do? You run outside with the cutlass or with the knife? What do you do? So where it is you fit the criteria legally, a UNC government will take steps to ensure law-abiding citizens can obtain firearms. We'll change the law to make it possible for average citizens of good character, no criminal record, to obtain legal firearms. I wanted to make that position very clear, because this issue on the firearms is on the airways daily.
That there you have clearly articulated, clearly reasoned, clearly planned, good policy in relation to 1, crime, but 2, the ownership of legal firearms. All of this nonsense that you see going on today, all this commentary by the PNM and the government about legal firearms committing crime and all of that is to distract from the issue. The issue is the real crime problem in this country is spurred by illegal firearms. And not just any illegal firearms of amazing calibers and sophistication.
Yeah.
When you have law-abiding citizens who can't get protection from the police, because we know the police are failing to protect citizens, they have a right, not necessarily a constitutional right, but they have a right under the statute to apply to be considered for legal firearms. So why shouldn't they be granted that?
If these bandits and these criminals are aware that the society now has the ability to have possession of legal firearms, they will think twice before going in.
Yes.
But what is amazing, the Minister of National Security and all of them who have been there, Gary did a marvelous job. There are 12,000 illegal firearms that they have checked.
Yes.
That have come through the country. Where have they come through the country? In barrels,
yes.
through the ports.
Yes.
The Prime Minister speaks about 80-something ports of entry in Trinidad. You don't have the ability and the skills to be able to set up systems whereby you could prevent some of these and get to know the source of it. Then they speak about X amount of gangs, 2,000 gangs or whatever. If you know that there are 2,000 gangs, what are you doing about it? Are you not following them? And they come with this issue about the Bail Amendment Act for year upon year, and they want to pressure, say that the opposition has not been supporting them. That has nothing to do with the issue of how people are losing their lives. Almost 3,500 people have lost their lives in 7 years of the PNM administration.
And the point is,
that's 3,500 citizens have lost their lives.
Tragic.
Yeah.
And the point is, the policy that you seem to be focusing on our government to fight crime is to restrict law-abiding citizens from getting fired.
Yeah.
And not only that, it is clear that they don't have a problem with any law-abiding citizen getting firearms. It seems that they are select persons. Right? So there's a clip, and I want to play this, and I want to commend Dr. Munilal, because as a young lawyer, this is what I call expert cross-examination. You wouldn't go to court and wouldn't see cross-examination.
To find Hines in a dubious situation.
As I said, he held his trump to hang Jack.
And that's right.
He held his trump to hang Jack. Actually, play that clip from the Joint Select Committee and fine.
The policy issue of whether ministers ought to be recommending persons for FUL. You indicated then that you had no recollection that you recommended persons. Minister, I'm inviting you to reflect on that and to correct yourself.
I'm saying I have no recall of recommending anybody for any firearm.
My question to the Honorable Minister is, Minister, on a more relaxed reflection, you recommended 10 persons for firearm to the then Commissioner of Police, and I leave it there.
I want the record to read.
Yes, go ahead, sir.
I made no recommendation to any commissioner for anybody for any firearm. I can explain in greater detail, but it would be risky and foolish and stupid, and I will not follow that trend.
Detail.
However,
greater detail.
Suffice it to say, I recommended no one for no firearm.
So the text, as I recommended no one for no firearm, double negative as the English amongst us would say. But I recommended no one for no firearm, quote unquote. Let's read this text that has been circulated, which has not been denied. As far as I know, Doc, this text has been in the public domain for a number of days, and it has not been denied. And as long as this Hines Fitzgerald here is the same Hines that was just speaking, we have a problem. And this is what it says. Commissioner, I have a couple FUL applications for my security detail of soldiers. There is no objection for their warrant from the TTDF. I have watched them for 2 years. I am satisfied that they are fit and worthy. When you say somebody is satisfied that they're fit and worthy, isn't that a recommendation?
Yes, of course it is a recommendation. He's satisfied. But he's recommended there. They rotate.
They rotate with the CJ's detail. Don't bring the CJ in your bacchanal, please, right? Please give them your most favorable consideration.
That's a recommendation?
Unless, I don't know, maybe we need to get the definition of recommendation. It is either Hines doesn't understand basic English, he doesn't know what the meaning of the words he uses really mean, such as recommendation, or he is telling an untruth.
Yeah.
He is telling an untruth if this text message is accurate. And as I've said, it's in the public domain, he needs to deny it. This matter should be looked at. And then he goes on, let's go on, actually scroll on a little bit there again. The others have not yet applied. I have completed the application. Oh, sorry, this is the wrong. So yes, just WhatsApp me full name. And then he goes on, I was a clerk at fire, etc., etc. Now, in my view, you can bring it back to us actually. We don't need to read the other text. I think that makes the point, right? Yeah, there is Commissioner, what is the position? He's following up on the recommendations. Doc.
And he said that he made no recommendation.
No, clear as day. I made no recommendation.
You know what I think that he has, according to the parliamentary rules and practice,
yes,
he has spoken on untruths
Yes.
in the parliament.
That pays that
because
way.
the parliamentary committee is parliament.
Yes.
And therefore, he stands, I'm
is
sure
the consequence,
Dr. Munilal is possibly considering bringing him before the privileges committee for telling the
Well,
untruth.
that is a matter.
Yeah.
This has to be looked, well,
Yeah.
let the population judge. But this is a matter that has to be looked into very seriously.
And particularly Parliament, which is sacrosanct, and you're not supposed to be speaking any lies in
It is
Parliament.
the people's parliament.
That's
You are
right.
essentially lying to the people.
That's
if
right.
you tell an untruth to Parliament, you are telling an untruth to the
people.
people of Trinidad
Yeah.
and Tobago and to our democratic institutions, which cannot be right.
Boy.
So where on earth does Minister Hines get off telling the population? On the first occasion, he made no recommendation, but yet coming to say, yet clearly evidence being produced in the public domain that a recommendation was made.
You know what is amazing, Kyle?
Yes.
If the boots were on the other side and on the UNC feet,
Oh,
man,
riots.
the people will be rioting
Riots,
around
riots.
the Parliament, and they will be rushing to put you before the
Riots, and they would
privileges
have-
committee.
And they would have an effigy
Yeah.
of you and the leader and Dr. Munilal being dragged through Port of Spain.
Port of Spain, yes.
But today, here we have clear disrespect to our parliament. This is the same government who entered into agreement with Nelson Gate to hide things from parliament.
That's right.
So it's not bad enough that you're hiding things from parliament. You are also willing to mislead parliament.
And to tell the untruth, questionable. Yeah.
Well, it has to
That's
be
me.
investigated. It has to be investigated. If those texts are accurate, it has to be investigated. And those texts have hit the public domain. And to date, I have not heard any denial at all.
And you know, Minister Hines is always quick to go on his social media.
Yes.
So
well, yes.
if he had the truth on that, he would have gone long time to
Exactly.
deny it.
If he wanted to deny, because we remember, Doc, just the other day, you had the horrific sight of a teacher having to shelter her children in a classroom.
That's right.
Shelter and protect and keep them calm, well trained, executed, brilliant tactics by the teacher. And you had him run into social media, maybe within a few hours of that, to condemn the teacher and say that was an exaggeration.
That is it's unacceptable, and it is shame.
Yes, shameful.
When you have two warring factions in the area surrounding the school.
Yes.
Before you tackle the two warring factions, are they bigger than the government? Are they bigger than the police service? So one on one side of a street and the other on another side of the street. One can't cross there and they're shooting out at each other. What is this thing about police posts and people making rounds, the police service making rounds and so on? You need to get to the crux of the matter and get in the community and see who are the people that is creating this niche of crime on one area and the other group. You have to weed them out. You have to search their homes, find out who have the guns, where are these guns coming from, who's shooting the bullets across on either side. This is happening. They have allowed these amount of gangs to flourish. Yes. You remember, we take you back when Prime Minister Manning was meeting with the gang leaders, 24 gang leaders at Holiday in one of the hotels, and they were trying to make peace with them. You can't make peace now. And you have 2,000 gangs flourishing in Trinidad and 12,000 illegal guns outside there, and you allowing this country to be brought to a state of complete fear and panic. You can't even get out of your home. You can't go shopping. Your children, you have to worry whether your children are with you and their lives are in danger. You're driving in the night, you're looking back behind you, you're looking at your side. No, this is unacceptable. This cannot be allowed to continue. And I urge the people of Trinidad and Tobago, I have been around for a few decades and have never seen anything like this, with the fear of people, and they're selling out their homes. They're selling their homes at low prices. They're taking the loss and they're leaving. They're leaving in droves. And if the immigration laws in other countries would have facilitated more people, you would see thousands more leaving, but they have nowhere to go.
And they're leaving not because they want to leave sweet Trinidad and Tobago. They're leaving because they have to protect their lives, the lives of their children, their property, their livelihood. People want a good life. People want to enjoy their lives, and they can't do it because of this incompetence. And just as with the legal firearms, you have to draw the parallels. Just with the legal firearms, it's the same thing with the teacher. The priorities of this ministry and minister seem to be seriously skewed. Instead of going after illegal firearms, you're attacking legal firearm holders.
Yes.
Instead of going after the criminals, you're criticizing the teacher. Your priorities are totally screwed up.
Well, hopefully we will be able to discuss the issue of indiscipline and school violence at some time in the program. But you know, I can't understand how a government could stand and say, well, we're not putting a police post. The commissioner of police, we're not putting a police post, but you have police officers who will be patrolling. Patrolling to do what? When you have on one side of the road the criminal gangs there, on the other side the other criminal gangs, what are you doing about them? You're leaving them to go and you want to patrol in the middle of the street? It is nonsensical, it is unacceptable, it shows no commitment to solving crime in this country. And this is just one minuscule example of people dying, children dying, young boys dying if they're crossing the street and so on from one gang to the other. Get rid of the gangs, go inside and fight.
The UNC has always supported legislation to assist in the fight against
crime.
It is clear that it is either A, you don't know how to use the legislation, or B, you're so busy going after political opponents.
That's what.
Right? That your priorities are off. Just today, yes, and put it up. This is clear, Doc. You were in these administrations.
Yeah, look, Mr. Pandey, before 95 to 2000, crime was less than 100 per year. And then
look at that steep climb.
Right.
Under the PNM.
PNM, under Mr. Manning.
UNC comes back in power, brings it down, 2015.
The lowest crime had been there for years during Mrs. Bises's.
And then you had a little drop with the former commissioner. For some reason, they don't like the former commissioner. Again, PNM interfering politically in independent institutions. And you see the cause there. That is clear evidence that anytime you interfere with independent institutions for your own political, it's like a sickness. They have to control everything. Why? Why do you have to control everything? Is there some medical issue there?
From my analysis, every time PNM comes into government, the crime rate goes up.
I think that's
as though it's a free sheet. Do whatever you want under PNM because they can't manage crime. So the criminals are at large to do whatever they want to do because of. But under UNC, they are very cautious. When Gary Griffith was there, crime was down at one of the lowest, 352 in a particular year. 379. Where is it now? 500 and something. So 3,500 deaths in 7 years under PNM. Totally unacceptable.
And today, I think the crime rate is what? 5 something? What was the crime rate today? 5 what? 500. I think it's about 530.
Yeah. You come close to 600. God forbid.
503. 503 today. And just today, it affected me in a sense today.
Because you were at the mall.
Because I was at the mall. That's where I go. Well, I shouldn't even say, but sometimes I go and have coffee there with a friend, and maybe within an hour or two of leaving,
somebody was shot.
Somebody shot and killed in front, right there. You know how surreal that is.
You can understand if there are stray bullets and you're around, and then you could be right around the person who is being. But this is totally unacceptable, man. The government should resign. Prime Minister Rowley, I call upon you, Tim Gopeesingh, call upon you tonight. You should be ashamed of the way that you are managing this country. I feel disheartened. I feel sad to know that you have been a friend for so many years, and you have mismanaged this country. I call upon you as a friend that you should step down, call elections, let the people decide who they want to run this country, and let the people be governed properly. You do not have competent people around you. You may want to think that you can do X and Y, but you have shown no signs of being able to do what you may think in your mind. And you have really misgoverned this country over the last 7 years. And this is the worst it has ever been. And I think you should hold your head in shame now and know that you have not been able to govern this country, particularly over the last 2 years. Do the honorable thing. If honor is with you still, do the honorable thing. Step down, call an election, and let the people decide. We want a fresh team now.
I want to tell you, Prime Minister, you are not a friend of mine. I don't have the pleasure of knowing you.
Well, I know you for over 50 years.
I want to repeat the words of his own Minister of National Security. Perhaps you and your government are in the wrong place at the wrong time. The wrong place at the wrong time. You remember you remember just recently a child in a playground was at the wrong place at the wrong time.
That's what Heinz said.
If a stray bullet had hit me in Starbucks, what would have been the thing? I was at the wrong place at the wrong time.
And you choose your friends wrongly.
I choose my friends wrongly. That is where we are now, and this thing is having such an effect, as you would know, Doc, as somebody who also understands the economy. It affects our foreign direct investment. In fact, so much that just Yesterday or day before, the U.S. Embassy had to put out a release on crime. I don't know. Do we have that document? Well, look at this. Look at this.
They said don't come to Trinidad.
Reconsider.
Yeah, reconsider.
If it is you are thinking, you booked your holiday, you want to come and see the beaches, the tourism, experience the culture, the carnival of Trinidad.
And don't go into Port of Spain.
Don't go into Port of Spain. Reconsider. Let's look at this. Trinidad and Tobago, the Department of State renewed its travel advisory, Trinidad and Tobago level 3. Reconsider travel due to crime. I wonder if your colleague, the Minister of Health, thinks that we are number one in the world in this. Right? Number one in the world according to Arnold.
Well, he has to account as Minister of Health. I still hold that for over 4,000 deaths in this country. And the Prime Minister, our leader of the opposition, and myself have been saying that once we get into government, we will ensure that there is a commission of inquiry, a commission of inquiry into these deaths of 4,000 plus patients, when 99% of the people in the intensive care unit died. Why did they die? But that's a separate issue for a separate time. And as you mentioned, the Minister of Health.
There could very well be crimes in that, for all we know, and that is why we need a commission of inquiry. But let's continue this. Reconsider travel to Trinidad due to the crime exercise. Increased caution in Trinidad and Tobago due to terrorism and kidnapping. Some areas have increased risk. Read the entire. This is a report. Yes. So some areas have increased risk. Read the entire travel. Read the entire. Yes. So that's the problem. Here you have a serious issue of crime affecting foreign direct investment in this country, right? And this is what they're telling. Exercise normal. Exercise increased caution. This is what 3 is. Reconsider travel. So go back to 1 and 2 there, actually come back, right? Exercise normal precautions. I think that's where you go anyway. Look out, be safe, secure your items. Exercise increased caution. We passed that. Now they're actually telling citizens, Americans who want to visit Trinidad and Tobago, reconsider.
And 4, do not travel.
And the last one, which probably we're headed for under this PNM, no coincidence perhaps is red, but do not travel. Do not travel. You can imagine that is where we are headed. Just like every indicator, and you could correct me down, every single indicator to measure this government's performance, they have failed woefully.
Everywhere.
Whether it's murder rate, whether it's GDP, whether it's economic progress, whether it's diversification, whether it's rule of law index, whether it's perception of corruption.
Kyle, as an attorney, I find you formidable in bringing these points out.
I have excellent role models in the United. You have Mr. Rambali, you have Ms. Lakshmi Dayal, you have Mr. Hussein, you have all of these brilliant attorneys. And when attorneys get together and cross-reference and think, you come with very strong arguments.
I admire the capability and the capacity in our party.
And of course, you have to watch douglAR Politics every Saturday, every Wednesday, and you learn a lot as well.
Yeah, and one stick up in for a minute. You know, outside in the country, there are people who meet you and say, well, you know, Dr. Gopeesingh, we're not hearing you all at all. What is it that you all say? What we're doing. But we have the Prime Minister, the leader of the opposition. I call her Prime Minister because she will be Prime Minister again pretty shortly. The leader of the opposition and former Prime Minister. Every Monday night with a virtual meeting. The only time we didn't have many of those was the early part of COVID. Then you have Thursday press conferences. You have the Sunday press briefings. And
you have Victor Roberts on Tuesday.
And you have douglAR Politics.
You have douglAR Politics on Wednesday. Every single day you want to hear the UNC, you could.
And we are speaking out. We are speaking out. What can an opposition do? The opposition is not in the position to implement any policies or programs. The government has to do it. So when the people are talking, you get at the government and ask the government why they are not doing X and Y, and why is this thing so radically wrong, and why is there this incompetence and mismanagement and corruption at the highest level?
Yes.
You know, this government came in 2015 making all sorts of accusations, corruption, and this is something that they try to stick on the UNC from time immemorial. But I can tell you that the PNM invented corruption, they masterminded corruption, and they perfected corruption since the days of Dr. Eric Williams, starting with the Lockjoint scandal. But what we are seeing now in terms of corruption is one of the worst that you can see. Lack of accountability, lack of transparency. They don't want the procurement legislation, so that's why they're hiding everything under the umbrella of no procurement legislation. And Kyle, you'll remember they removed 5 areas under the procurement legislation,
yes,
which almost minimizes the effectiveness,
yes,
and the efficiency of the procurement legislation. And Mr. Munilal, who is head of the procurement board, I think he's the CEO. I think he's very fed up now.
Frustrated. Imagine you have a committee, you have a body in order, and the population has been crying out for that legislation, crying out for something to deal with procurement in this country. The United National Congress gets the legislation going, gets it drafted, brings it, and here you have the PNM government destroying it. But you want to point out, you said, well,
Can I stick up in and just go back to this procurement thing? When Mrs. Bissessa became Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, I think the procurement legislation was the second piece of legislation she brought to cabinet. The first was the Children's Life Fund.
Act number 1 of 20, yes. Children's Life.
Then the procurement legislation. I was appointed by the Honorable Prime Minister at that time to be the leader of the team for the procurement legislation for the first year. Then Dr. Tiwari took over the second year. While we were sitting as in the Select Committee of Parliament for 2 years, Mr. Rowley and Mr. Imbert, who were in opposition then, they failed to attend any of the meetings for the procurement legislation for 2 years, until the people began to speak out and say, why are you not attending? And it is only when the people through the constituencies put the pressure on them, then they came back. And even when the procurement legislation was passed in 2015, they knew fully well that if they got in the government, they wouldn't want it. So they have spent close to $350 billion in the 7 years without any procurement legislation. And the people are not questioning them. Why are you not questioning? Just a little instance in education. I saw they built a school in Tobago for $80 million, a primary school. $80 million. The highest cost of a primary school in Trinidad was $33 million during our time. But that is just one example, and there are numerous examples of over expenditure and without lack of accountability.
And therefore, when people talk about that the UNC isn't doing this, the UNC isn't that, you all have been, the UNC has been, well, first of all, when in government, putting in place the policies and legislation to make this country a better democracy and make more open, safer, and transparent, and safer community. Because when you could save money for those things and hire more police, have more cameras, have better equipment for the police, have better vehicles, you're fighting crime.
That's right.
So that is why people need to understand procurement legislation isn't only about procurement, it's about every other service being given to Trinidad and Tobago being properly resourced. And when you talk about the UNC not doing anything now, it is the UNC that is dragging this government to court in every single instance. You had the instance with Jawala Rambaran. You had the Police Service Commission order that even the leader herself took to court, put on her robes, dusted off her robes and went to court with and won. You have several other instances where UNC and the UNC lawyers, as they like to call us, are taking this government to court. You even have the MPs and a senator. I don't know if you have that video there. Do you call this the bad boy video, Doc? I don't know if you saw this one. The bad boys in the party. There we are, Mr. Ram. Senator Napkin.
So we are here today to defend our democracy, to stand up in the interest of the rights of Trinidad and Tobago citizenry. We are no longer dealing with a government of laws, you know. We are now dealing with a government of lawless elites. That unlawful action on the part of those who are in governance must be met with lawful resistance.
Then we call upon the police service to investigate whether the former Attorney General, Mr. Al-Rari, engaged in conduct which was improper and which interfered with Mr. Nelson's free choice to plead guilty or not guilty.
And there you have a UNC MP and Senator delivering personally a pre-action protocol letter, Senator David Nackett, to the Commissioner of Police, calling upon the police to do their job. And I want to read some paragraphs from it, Doc, if you would permit me. This is Senator Nackett's letter. I am a civic-minded citizen and patriot of Trinidad and Tobago, and I believe in preserving and protecting the rule of law. And he speaks on behalf of the entire United National Congress, I'm sure. I am also an opposition senator in the Parliament of Trinidad and Tobago, and therefore consider myself duty-bound by oath to office to serve the interests of the citizens. In light of my beliefs and oath to serve the people of our republic, I hereby call upon you to take immediate steps to investigate whether the members of the government, including but not exclusive to the Prime Minister, the Attorney General, Minister Stuart Young, Renuka Sagram Singh, and Minister Fitzgerald Hines, have conspired to and or committed the crime of perverting the course of justice and or misbehavior in public office. There you have, and he sets out, it's online, I'm sure it's on Facebook, he sets out an entire table of events, narrative, setting out. He's done the investigation for them here. He has done the investigation. This is what he calls for in the end. He basically says, let me get it here. In this regard, you must act with expedience to investigate the commission of these serious offenses. The anatomy of the investigation should be as follows. This is Senator Naked, telling the police, it's clear that you're not doing your job, but this is how you have to do it.
He brings it.
Look at there, yeah. Go down to paragraph 18. Oh, you just have the first page? Yeah. Alright, but let me read paragraph 18. I respectfully suggest that the investigation be commenced by immediate procurement and execution of search warrants to seize and obtain cell phones, laptops, tablet devices, pursuant to Section 5 of the Indictable Offences Act. I suggest that the application for a search warrant be made promptly, given the reported statements by the then Attorney General that he has already deleted communication with the said Vincent Nelson. This is action. This is action.
And he is bringing to the attention the lack of ability of the police commissioner to do what is appropriate. You could imagine, Kyle,
yes,
if it was found in UNC's page at that time,
yes.
the amount, you would have 50 police officers with submachine guns coming at your home to try and pull you out of your home, as they did Mr. Pandey,
yes,
and they did
Sadiq.
Sadiq with the cocaine in the water tank, and then even our distinguished attorney Anand.
Yes.
And I remember they parading me down the street in 2002.
Yes.
That is the viciousness of PNM.
That is the PNM.
So if the boots were on the UNC feet, you would see what the police department would have been doing. Truckloads of police officers with sophisticated machine gun coming at your home to pull you out of your home. Yes. But no action is being taken on this. And this is terrible. This is wrong. This is morally wrong. It is reprehensible that a police department knows all these things going. And forgive me, we're not interfering with the Director of Public Prosecution because he's independent, but I hope that he is taking note of what has happened and what is going on. And up to today, the police commissioner has not opened his mouth and said anything about what action is going to be taken against people who have, in the views of the legal minds like yourself, have committed offenses. Yes. And if it were UNC, when they accuse UNC of the email rubbish that Rowley brought to Parliament and lied to Parliament, and this was kept for 3 to 4 years, that Emailgate and Emailgate, they took away the telephones of the members who were named in it. Yes. Why they haven't taken away their telephones? Why they haven't taken away their laptops?
To Google,
yes,
to get fake. Imagine, and I still can't understand to today how someone could be named as Attorney General who has the gall, the boldness, the temerity, I don't know what it is, to say, don't look at the form of the email, look at the substance. When the form of the email is clearly fake and fraud. I don't know which court of law you could take that email to and say this is an email, but ignore the fact that the email addresses are wrong and fake, etc. Yeah. Look at the content. Total craziness. And for that piece of evidence, you had endless police action right into Google to get emails, etc.
Yes.
But here you have public statements made by the persons themselves.
And
you have an agreement.
And nothing is being
done. You have
done.
a witness who filed a case in court and swore to it, right? Because you have to sign something called a certificate of truth when you plead facts in a case. So you have sworn evidence in court saying the facts and that people tried to get me to sign this agreement, etc. And nothing done. And then on top of that, you have the fact that it was sealed somehow to be hidden, all of which are markers and badges of wrongdoing, and no police action.
That's right.
No police action.
It's such a shame and an international disgrace that this government has put us through. Yes. And I want to advise my legal colleagues in the United National Congress, don't stop don't keep the fight on, don't stop short of what you all are doing, and to bring justice back to this country. And so peace of minds of citizens who are affected directly as a result of this. PNM is disaster, they're disastrous government. And they are incompetent, they mismanage, they don't have the capacity to govern. I don't know why we're not having an election. We need to have an election.
They are a plague, they are causing
everywhere has failed.
They are causing our democracy to crumble. And Doc, I don't mean to make this funny, both metaphorically and literally, because just this week you could imagine the seat of our democracy, the Parliament of Trinidad and Tobago, that they took all this pride in the Red House, etc. The seat of our democracy became an unstable environment, not because of any insurrection, no, but because of PNM incompetence and mismanagement. You had the crumbling of the roof.
The infrastructure.
The crumbling, I don't know, do we have the clip by Dr. Munilal there, where he was speaking about that issue, where he raised a very pertinent question, in Parliament in relation to this. Because
489 million for...
No, you're praising me about the facts, but you have these things, you must have this written down.
No, it's up here. 489, and recently I heard that the President's house went from 89 million to additional 100.
And there was one in Tobago, the house in the...
Yeah, it went from 22 million to 70 million.
To 70 million.
So that's crazy. What I speak about, the lack of procurement, because they don't want it.
Yes.
They're the most corrupt government that this country, under Keith Rowley, these 7 years, is the most corrupt government we have ever seen and witnessing now in this country. And everything they touch, they put their hands on to do is corruption and corruption and corruption.
And you would think that if you overspend, you get good quality at least.
Right.
You thought so, but then you have the Parliament. I'll tell you, and you know what's strange enough? You have that happening to our Parliament. Totally national disgrace and shame. Our Parliament falling apart in front of our very eyes. In fact, I understand, my information, I could be wrong, that this thing fell on where some members of Parliament were sitting. Had they been in Parliament at the time, you could have had serious injury to members of Parliament and to staff, public servants.
I remember seeing Minister Donald Cox speaking, and the rain began to fall on her, and when she realized that it is water, she had to stop. So that happened then. They didn't do anything about it. Some minimal type of thing. But who are the people who put on the roof? What was the cost of doing it? Are they going to do it without any additional charge? No. Yeah. So
what steps now are you taking?
And you know what this the leader of government business, I read recently, that she said the UNC should be grateful that the PNM put this into place. The UNC doesn't operate like that. We would not have spent $489 million. We were trying to ensure that it was done within cost and appropriately. President House cost 89 million and went up to about 120 million. All the Millfloor and the Stolmeyer Castle and the other places, where have they shown the accountability and the transparency in terms of giving out the contracts for these things? It's total.
It's absolutely mad. And I don't think, do we have the clip with Dr. Munilal asking the questions in Parliament with respect to this house? We have it or we don't have it? Or we're going to look for it?
Yeah, we'll find it.
All right, we're going to look for it. But either way, that is a very, very important thing. But it also talks about very, very poor infrastructure.
Well, if you...
And here you have look at this. This is PNM spent $441 million in tax. $1 million, right? Taxpayer dollars.
And look at the water falling on our head.
Water falling, yes. I remember this. Run this clip actually. Let me see if I find the other
So the
one.
contractors have to be held responsible for that type of slipshod work as well. You know, I watch Parliament every day, and I'm amazed at the things that the Speaker... I'm no longer in Parliament. I could be brought before the parliamentary privilege and so on. But I'm not happy what is going on from the level of the chair, at the Speaker's level. When everything which is supposed to be important, you bring a motion on the COVID. 5 times you bring it in, 3 times in the lower house, 2 times in the upper house, but you rejected it. Then you bring a motion on the flooding, rejected. Yes. You bring a motion on crime, it is rejected. Oh my God. It seems as though nothing is important for this country.
You know, one people don't understand it, but the most important institution that is a bulwark against dictatorship, meaning the very institution that was created by mankind to stand up against totalitarian government or governance, is the parliament. And therefore, in a parliament, you must have the most liberal access. That's why you give unprotected free speech. And you must be allowed to ask the questions, the difficult questions, to hold the government account, because at the end of the day, that's the most in our system that an opposition can do. Yeah. Hold the government account in parliament. And here you have speakers of the house.
Take the responsibility of telling the population, well, look, I don't think it is important for it to be discussed at a level for an hour's debate on the crime or an hour's debate on the flooding in Trinidad and Tobago. I am responsible. I say that I am not allowing this to happen. But Parliament is to speak, and to parley means to speak. And if you're not given the opportunity to say what is you consider to be important as an opposition, man, you're depriving nearly 400,000 people of the opposition support.
And these are by, with all due respect to both presiding officers, these are persons who nobody voted for their position. They are appointed.
I'm sure they know that themselves.
They are appointed. They're nominated. Why are you getting into people's
this system has to stop. A speaker is meant to be a person who supposed to be neutral, who's supposed to look at issues on both sides and give judgments and decisions based on your observation and your neutrality. Not to be shifting to one side because you were appointed by them. When you reach that position, you must respect the position that you're in, not to disrespect it by doing things that are not in keeping with parliamentary practice. You have the Commonwealth Parliamentary Association meetings. This is something that could be brought before, and if it is brought before the CPA, I mean, Trinidad and Tobago will be looked at with disrespect of these things being allowed to continue, despite the fact that we boast of democracy in Trinidad. It can't be allowed to continue.
And one of the things that...
And I've served under different different speakers and different presidents of the Senate and so on, and I have never seen anything like this before.
One of the things, you remember, we tried to bring before the Parliament COVID, before COVID was COVID.
January 30th, 2020.
Yes, there you were trying to raise COVID as a matter of public urgent importance.
And we brought it twice after that in the lower house and twice in the Senate.
And it was never debated.
But yet the 4,400 people have died as a result of COVID. They were ill prepared, they mismanaged the entire thing, and lives were lost.
You have crime, you had gangs, you had, and most importantly, the flooding issue. And I want to read, do we have the article of talking about Mr. Parry, I believe. Do we have that article, Darren? I want to read that article because I felt, you know, the PNM is doing bad when the Express is criticizing it. One of the major things is really when the Express is criticizing them. So I'm going to give it a read here. Can we pull it up on the screen? Doc, and I want you to listen to this. Not ready yet? I'm going to give it a quick read here.
I'll find it.
1 second. Actually, I don't want to have to behave like Anil, you know, when we can't pull up sometime.
Archie has been doing a
phenomenal job.
Yeah.
Government missing in action. Can we enlarge that? Right, bring it down. Let's start from the top. Government missing in action. Member of Parliament Rushton Parry got it right. No?
Yeah.
Am I seeing right? This is the Express. Member of Parliament Mr. Rushton Parry got it right when he described the ongoing flooding disaster as a national emergency. Well, if obvious was our definition, I think this was it.
Yeah.
It is obvious as a national, but yet, as you said, the Speaker of the House wants nothing to do with it, doesn't want to debate. If we can't debate national emergencies in our Parliament,
right.
Well, I don't know what our Parliament is for. He has described the state of affairs as alarming and has called on the Ministry of National Works. He attributes the current situation to what he said has been an absence of routine cleaning and upkeep by the Ministry of Drainage Division. You made that point earlier. Where we disagree with him, however, is in placing this matter entirely at the feet of this single ministry. While both this ministry and the Ministry of Local Government have joint operational responsibility for flood alleviation and prevention. So the experts saying, yeah, you didn't go far enough.
That's right.
You have to criticize more people, and we will take that. We will take that. The scale of this year's visitations have created urgencies that extend way beyond their remit. Repeated and prolonged periods of flooding have created health hazards, property losses, problems of access to food, clean water, fuel, medication, and other necessities have become a feature of the inconveniences and hardships generated in the process. Some communities have been cut off. I think just in St. Augustine, I remember MP Khadija Amin complaining that there's a whole community marooned. And she had to go down there and provide services.
That's South Palestine.
And so about, yeah, she had to go down there and risk her own health and go down. That is service from the United National Congress. It affected communities in South, Central, East Trinidad, as well as parts of Tobago.
But just go back to the collapsed roads and damaged bridges.
Let's go back up there. Yes,
MP Rudy Indarsingh asked the Prime Minister if he has any ideas of the amount of collapsed bridges and roads that are damaged. The Prime Minister said no, he doesn't have any. In other words, he is not there.
Yeah.
He doesn't know what is going on.
Correct. And actually, I want you to, you remember, Dr. Monilal, anytime there was, I'm not even going to lead you in the question. You know, in law we have something called leading. I'm not even going to lead you. You tell me the first thing that comes in your mind. Whenever there was flooding, what was the sight and vision you were bound to see by our leader, Kamla Prasad?
She was out there from day number one. I remember
with boots.
Yeah, with boots on, the Wellington boots, we describe it. When we were sworn in 2010,
the next
rain
day.
the same day rain began to pour, and the Martin began to flood. And the Prime Minister just sworn in. She said, ministers, I need you with me. And we all went down to Diego Martin and tried to work with the people and see what way we could have alleviated their plight. And that continued. Mrs. Bissessar, as Prime Minister, leader of the opposition, has always been there with the people, looking after the people's welfare and trying to assist as much as possible. And I remember St. Helena in 2017, I think, with the big flooding, where all my colleagues began to give all the help. From my colleagues, not from government. They came and gave assistance to the thousands of people who were affected by the flooding.
So have that sight in your mind. Let the people understand. Have that vision. Close your eyes and vision that sight with the then Prime Minister in her boots leading. There we have the picture. Look at that sight. And actually pull up, while we're in the midst of flooding today, what is the Prime Minister doing? You could do that side by side.
Playing golf.
Is that possible actually? I want, we could say it, right? But I want people to see. You want comparisons?
That's right.
You want comparisons? Yes, let's do it.
No, he doesn't care about the people who are affected by the flood.
Look at what is happening. And yesterday flooding under partnership UNC government. Look at what is happening. And when you see that image, right? Look at that. Look at that. Yes. Bring Viv. I hate to bring one of my heroes, Viv Richards, into this. But
we'll leave him out of it.
So we'll leave him out of it, right? Today flooded. Look at this image. One to the right and one to the left.
That's right.
I think the choice is clear. Right? All we need to do is put a little ballot box, you know, the X where you put your X when you vote, behind one and behind it on the other, and ask everybody to vote.
This is caring and care, non-caring,
compassion and hate, empathy and love on the one hand, and disdain for the population.
Speaks volumes of leadership and commitment.
They say a picture speaks 1,000 words. Well, I think that picture and that comparison, well done actually. I know I put you on the spot there. That comparison speaks a lot.
I've been reading recently, I want to just move a little on the issue of what we saw when Prime Minister Robinson, former president, his daughter being on the ground in the school violence.
Right, I want to get in that. We have one clip to play. I believe that's a clip of Ms. Haynes. Let's pull up that. I want you to listen to this, Doc, and I know this is reflective of the UNC comments, policy, and your own policy and comments as to what were the things. Because I think she speaks about, under your tenure, some of the things that the United National Congress were doing and intends to do. We have the clip there?
Personally,
let's run it.
I have raised countless times how to use the education sector in our fight against crime. The introduction of conflict resolution within schools. Let us help young people learn how to de-escalate situations. De-escalate before it gets to a violent space. Let us introduce anger management workshops, extend support to our young citizens to help manage their emotions and their responses to difficult situations. I've also called for the introduction of things like gender studies, the increased support in social services to make it available in schools. Don't come and tell us time and time again about the all of government approach, and evidently you all don't talk to each other. We don't need new laws to do this. They don't need to come to Parliament to do this. All they need is political will, the ability to do some work, to get up and do some actual work.
Yeah, I want to compliment and congratulate my younger member of Parliament on her brilliance and her ability to communicate and articulate the position. And this is one of the reasons why I really stepped out of the electoral politics, to give way to some of the younger ones that you see the brilliance that is taking place. And I've spoken with Anita a few times on matters related to education. But I think it's important for the country to understand what Prime Minister Kamala Persad-Bissess's government, the People Partnership government, did with the fact of indiscipline and school violence.
Tell us.
And one with Minister Dikoto and myself, I want to God bless Minister Dikoto's soul, a real distinguished educator, and both of us put our heads together. Now, school violence is not a new thing. It has been existing for a long time, but it has increased considerably under this administration over the last 7 years. Minister Garcia and Minister Lovell allowed this thing to go on unchecked. Since 1985, there was a commission of inquiry and a report published on how to manage school violence since the days of Minister Clive Pantin. We took that 1985 document and we analyzed it and we went further. We had massive consultations in Trinidad with almost 3,000 to 4,000 educators for 2 national workshops on education as a whole, where over 3,000 to 4,000 educators participated and made recommendations. Then we had 8 district workshops on consultations, and from those we gleaned and we came up with this 24 plan and policies for implementation, which we did, and we were successful in ameliorating the widespread school violence. The first area, we established a task force to do it, and we made the recommendations.
UNC performance.
That's UNC.
Performance, yeah.
So that task force brought out these recommendations, and we begin. The first thing was to bring the school social support system, the amount of guidance counselors, guidance officers, school social workers, behavioral psychologists, clinical psychologists, back up to its maximum level. Under Mr. Manning, they brought it down to about 300. And Mrs. Bissessa, as Prime Minister then, said, Minister, I want you to increase the amount of student support services personnel back to about 700. And so we had all secondary schools covered by personnel who were competent in analyzing the importance of and dealing with problems of students. So we fully staffed that. Then we identified the delinquent schools, and we found that there were about 50 secondary schools who were delinquent. We established 4 psychological education enhancement centers for training and retraining of students who were suspended and for correctional management, and they were staffed with clinical and behavioral psychologists and psychiatrists. We successfully ran several parenting and education workshops throughout Trinidad and Tobago, where parents were invited to seminars and educational seminars to help with the management of their children who were experiencing difficulties. At the last time I heard about it, were about 90,000 parents who came to these seminars and who began to assist their children with parenting and education, and who understood what parenting and education meant. We went on, we had a launch of the first national student hotline. I still remember that number, 800-4321, so that a child who has emotional problems, who is having problems, can call in that number, and you have at the end psychiatrists and psychologists in a confidential manner listening to their calls and helping them.
So stick up in there. This is a plan, that comprehensive, and all you've done there is spoken about a few points. Yeah. But there it is, a very clearly articulated, clearly described plan to treat with the student, to treat with the schools, to treat with the parenting, to treat with the fallout, not just abandon our children and let them go into gangs and whatever, but to also try to bring them back by constant supervision and help and guidance, psychologists.
Yeah, let me move through this. We established a circle of hope. In each classroom, you gave them an opportunity, the students, to speak with their teachers, and also the students who were at the top in the school to come to their classes and hear what grievances they may have. We had over 170 school safety officers, health and safety officers, who played an important role during the break time, lunchtime, and at evenings to make sure that the children are well supervised. My understanding is that as soon as Garcia and Lovell came, they disbanded their...
And that is why you had a principal
on the ground, because they removed these.
Because they vindictively and maliciously removed UNC
policies. We engaged the police service, the police officers on bicycles to go to the 50 schools on evenings and on mornings to establish that the students were leaving. We increased CCTV cameras in schools. We implemented systems where students were subject to walk-in body scans. We had about 2 or 3 body scans, and we began to move them around in the 50 schools, so the students would not know if their school is being searched with body scans today. So they're afraid to bring anything in. We also provided handheld scanners, 2 handheld scanners for each school in the country, so that their bags could be searched, so that nothing sharp could be brought in.
So stick one pin there. First you set out the psychological, the guidance approach, where you treating psychologically, you're dealing with the parents, you're dealing with training the teachers, you're dealing with psychologically, talking to children to bring them back from crime. And then you now have the enforcement component, where supervise, to physically prevent incidents in schools with the safety officers, the scanners, the monitors, to supervise, to ensure you don't have school violence. Move on.
We had a parenting academy established so that the parents could work together and spread information amongst themselves. We had 85 local school boards appointed so that the community, you remember Nelson Mandela says, you take a community to educate a child. So we had the local school boards with different representatives of the community working with the schools to help in the establishment and prevention, in the establishment of the management of the school. Yeah, they're gone. We implemented a number of the policies were based on the Selwyn Ryan recommendations, as I spoke about earlier then. We established crisis management team in each school. We had management teams in each school so that when these matters came up, the management teams were able to work together to help prevent it in the first place and then deal with it if it occurs. We established learning enhancement centers in 4 districts. We established student councils in schools, mentor-mentees program and motivational speakers in schools. We partnering with the Citizen Security Program, research in scientific, randomized schools across the country into students' performance. We constructed gymnasium in a number of secondary schools. We had 17 sports being established in the schools, so that former principal Shanaz Bax met me downstairs just a while ago, and he was telling me about lunchtime, and of course William Archie, lunchtime the children were taken up with a number of activities so that they don't have time to do the wrong things.
And that is the third phase. First of all, you had the psychological nurturing, you had the enforcement and supervision, and then you have diversion, meaning you are diverting children away from the life of violence and crime into more productive spheres, sport and extracurricular. That is planning.
We filled the vacancies of deans of disciplines. We increased the Boy Scouts, Girl Guide and Cadet Force in school. That's where you gain the strength. And so we were able to bring about the best academic performance ever in the history of Trinidad and Tobago in 2014 in all 3 subject areas, 3 examinations, CSEC, CAPE and SEA, and we bettered it in 2015. And that is as a result of the work that had been done. As soon as they came into office,
not only that, and added to that, you had more scholarships, more opportunities, more scholarships, more opportunities, GATE being diverted into tertiary education, so the system didn't stop at secondary schools.
Well, Mrs. as Prime Minister will tell you, When we came into office, the tertiary education participation, and Minister Fazal Karim will say that the tertiary education participation was 42% then.
Yes.
When we demitted office in 2015, the participation was 72%, way beyond our own expectations. And tremendous amount of work had been done in the tertiary education centers. When we came into office, PNM used to give 48 scholarships per year.
Yes, I remember.
We increased the scholarships to 500 per year. We gave out more than 2,000 scholarships during our 5-year term. We purchased 2 million textbooks for students. Every child in every class, in every school, in every subject had a textbook from the government and the Ministry of Education. We served 3 million meals during our 5-year, almost 155,000 meals per day.
Because I remember it was you that said that children had to have proper nutrition, start their day with a hot meal to make it more conducive
That's right.
to learning.
And we had thousands of students coming to school without having a meal at home.
Yes.
So that would have assisted them in having the right frame of mind and the amount of energy. So, and then Mrs. Visesa ensured that education got the best package in terms of expenditure. 16% of the annual expenditure in the different ministries came to Ministry of Education, the largest budget, because she placed emphasis on human capital development to achieve sustainable development.
Which has always been it's in our constitution.
And that
it's in the UNC constitution
right.
that we want to make a better human resource society, a well-developed society, trained and educated. And that has always been UNC policy.
Kyle, I could not put it better. Now, the GATE program was carried to the highest level, where those who did very well at the bachelor's level were able to get scholarship to the PhD level.
Yes.
So when you're trying to develop your country, you have to develop your country as a knowledge-based society, but obviously they don't have the knowledge and they don't have the vision. So we're going backwards. There was a swift and precipitous reversal of all the gains we made in the education sector as soon as PNM came, and worsened over the last 5 years. Then, Kyle, in terms of the performance of our government in education, it goes on about, I remember we have our government, if you look at the performance, it's a 421-page document. I had it, I sent it for my colleagues, the members of parliament and the senators recently, with the concurrence of the leader of the opposition. And when you look at that, it's amazing to see the gains that you made in performance over the 5 years that we were in government. And this is our document here, 15 pages on just education alone. And it goes on. A laptop initiative, TNT is a world leader with ICT in education. We achieve universal early childhood education. Literacy and numeracy, significant improvements in literacy and numeracy nationally, with the highest academic performance in history in 2014 in all 3 exams, SEA, CSEC and CAPE. Expansion of a Caribbean vocational qualification, CVQ, at the secondary level, from 42 to 102
CVQ,
schools.
That's
the Caribbean vocational qualification.
That's an excellent thing,
In terms of the students and the children understanding, we had pilot testing and neurodiagnostic testing of children to understand where they were. We had a special education program. Student Support Services Division expanded to over 700 professionals to include guidance counselors, school social workers, clinical behavioral psychologists. We had ensured that 25 special needs schools were operating.
Which is something that I find I'm not hearing
You're not hearing anything
about.
that leaves
So
the special
are we
needs.
leaving behind a whole segment of our population who may or may not be disabled or may have special challenges?
We did the research and we found that 7% of the student population have major difficulties and disabilities.
And they need special
It is
attention.
like dyslexia, autism, attention deficit hyperactive disorder, cerebral palsy, and visual problems and hearing problems, and also emotional, behavioral, and psychological abnormalities. So providing care. So we have the private, 14 private schools in special needs education, and we had 11 government. So we ensured that the students, thousands of students, will be being taken care of. And we partnered with many CBOs and NGOs caring for the education of students with special needs. Annual screening of approximately 18,000 children, visually and hearing impaired. And it goes on, continuous assessment component, Many people in this country talk about what we're going to do about the SEA, and all sorts of commentators speak. And up to today, I had made a challenge on our 5 years. Tell us what we're going to replace the SEA with.
Yes.
And there were no answers coming. But the 4,000 educators said, let us do a continuous assessment component so that the students will have 30% of the marks before going into the final exam. So we launched that continuous assessment component so that students were able to get 20 to 30% before going into the final exam. So they were only looking for 70% more. You know, as soon as PNM came in, they scrapped that. They scrapped it. So the continuous assessment component was scrapped. Look at this, improving academic performance. 1 teacher to every 14 students in primary school and 1 to every 12 students in secondary school. We had co-curricular and extracurricular activities, including sports in schools. And all teacher vacancies had been filled. These are just some of the things. And 2 out of 3 students received over 60% in SEA. Now we have 9,000 out of 18 students getting less than 30%, getting less than 30%. What a shame and disgrace.
That is another indicator, yet another indicator of PNM and this government's inability to govern, to provide services, and to provide and perform in the critical areas of a society, such as the delivery of education.
But what so... They swiftly and precipitously reversed all the gains that we had made in the education system within the 1 or 2 years. And I wouldn't go on to the infrastructure where we built 106 schools.
If you were to read all of the gains of the United
Teacher
Nations
training
Congress,
and development, curriculum change. Look at it, and it is here. William, it's 15 pages, and it's not institutional development, human resource management, full computerization, organizational restructuring, a communication strategy, relaunch of the Ministry of Education.
Sorry, what's that? We have a...
Correct.
Right, yes.
Right.
Yes, let us look
so
at that.
Guidance and
we were just
talking
about what are we going to do. Well, this is the UNC in action, getting out in the communities, having offices established to receive your complaints and to deal with your issues as best as we can. Do we have that clip here?
Yes. The opening of Labrie.
Labrie, the opening of Labrie. That is the office. So you take us home for a few minutes. Here we have a country in collapse. Democracy at its lowest, we started. Crime at its worst, infrastructure at its worst, education system failing.
Health The
gone.
economy.
Worst budget ever.
Unemployment.
Uncaring, unsympathetic, flooding.
Starvation.
So much bad social issues, so much things
over
that affect
100,000.
the common man. What are we to do? We have a few minutes again. You give us a summary, Doc.
I want to ask through this medium,
people, yes,
all these NGOs and CBOs and who were out there talking about us and against us for a number of years while we were in government and criticizing us. But as I said today, we have a 421-page document to show where the United National Congress performed in every sector of society. Now, why are the commentators not outside there? Where are the people who went at us and attacked us viciously over the 5 years? Where is the media who attacked us? And every good thing that we did, they put a different spin to it to try and show us in a different thing.
Where's the section?
And so much hate has occurred over negative things that have occurred, and we're not hearing the voices. Tonight, I want to call on our people. Be aware of what is happening around you. I'm sure you know what is wrong, how this government is not helping you. You are suffering. Speak out. Let us hear your voices. We are willing to work with you more and more. We are willing to bring everybody to come together. Everybody must come together so that we can get rid of this government once and for all. And PNM must never be able to see the reins of power ever in the history of Trinidad and Tobago again. They have governed this country for 46 out of the 60 years that we have been independent. And they have made a mess of things. This country is suffering today because of 46 years of PNM mismanagement. They had opportunities to govern properly, but they never did because they lacked the competence. You had Prime Minister Eric Williams running this country for over 20 years. You had George Chambers for 5 years. You have Patrick Manning for close to about 11 years, 5 plus another 7, 11, 12 years. You have Prime Minister Rowley now, and it's the worst 7 years ever in the history of Trinidad and Tobago. Come on, people, come on, lift your voices. Yes.
Wake up. My brother in arms, Mr. Victor Roberts, he has made a call, Doc, in case you didn't hear it. He has made a call, I think this is it. Yes, we must act now to save our beloved country. Join Victor Roberts and the defenders of democracy. I like that name.
Yes.
The defenders of democracy as we walk from Labre to Port of Spain seeking a fresh general election. This is action. First phase, so they break it up for you. We even make it convenient for you to defend your democracy. First phase, Labre to San Fernando. Second phase, San Fernando to Chaguanas. Third phase, Chaguanas to Port of Spain. We march on Port of Spain. And before, and as I said, and as I told Victor, all the police, the police are looking and saying this about march. We're going to write for permission, you know. We're going to write. So we're going to act within the law. But you will have to defend our right to express our democratic views via march. And if you don't do it, it have courthouse. So if you are the brave police officer who don't want to give us that permission, well, you will be dealt with in court.
But they are suffering as well. The police officers tell you it was Mrs. Bissessa who, because of her foresight, give them $1,000 more on their salary with almost early into our government because she knew the importance of the police officers.
And the importance of police to defend the law and our supreme law, which is the Constitution, and to defend our right to protest, freedom of expression, march, which is what we think. Actually, how much time we still have? Or? Okay, well, let's wrap it up, Doc. You give your final words, final sentences tonight. It was a pleasure, I want to say. It was a pleasure. You are the senior, so I'll let you close.
No.
I always respect the seniors, both in my profession and in yours. I want to say thank you very much. I want to thank Anil for letting me host, letting me be able to voice some concerns. Doc, take us home for a few seconds.
Well, first, it's a pleasure and a privilege and an honor to be with you, Kyle, and I think you have been marvelous in deputizing for Anil, and I appreciate it. And from our perspective, we are saddened to see how this country has gone down the drain. People speak about us being a failed state. I'm coming to the brink of a failed state. We are a failed state, and every institution of this country has crumbled. And it is time for this government to remove itself and call a fresh election so that the people can determine who they want to lead them. If it is the United National Congress, which I'm sure they will want us because of our track record, because of our performance, and they know that we can deliver. So my dear people listening, and spread to your neighbors, spread to your families that the time is now. Call for a general election and let's move the PNM once and for all.
Thank you very much. Now. That is the call from Dr. Gopeesingh. That is the call from the United National Congress. That is the call from my brother in arms, Mr. Victor Roberts. So people join us. As I said, walk with your effigy, walk with your signs, walk with your placard, be innovative, and let's get this thing done. Thank you and good night.
Good night.